I've been testing a whole new Untamed Beast list, and it's a pretty good one. Welcome to War Games on Toast, all of you lovely people. It's me, it's Toast. How are you all doing today? It's Road to Gold. We're back. I think it's week 5. We're done with Vexmore. We're done with Red Crushers. We're still in Untamed Beasts. This is our path to gold at Warhammer World in February. And I have been throwing around some spice in the old lab here, and it's done pretty well. So last episode and the episode before, I was going into the idea that running Vexmore and Red Crushers was basically just playing generic chaos and not really playing Untamed Beasts, even though Untamed Beasts do have the unique strength of having that rather wonderful in-faction pull. It really was just being carried by Vexmore and the Ephemeroid, and it was a bit too generic. It didn't really feel like what I wanted to do, even though it was undeniably powerful. And I teased the idea of running some Ephelim's Pandemonium and some sauce with that. And this idea came all the way back in my first ever Untamed Beast video from like a year and a half ago or so. And I mentioned Ephelim's Pandemonium being a really fun inclusion in Untamed Beasts, but I hadn't quite tested it out at that point. And honestly, I never got round to it. And until now, I put that year-old theory into practice, and it worked pretty darn well. And I'm excited to go through how it went well, the list exactly, and what I would change going forwards. It's going to be a fun time, so let's all strap in. Before I get into all that though, please be sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below, as well as potentially join my Patreon, like all these wonderful people on screen now, badoosh, as all of this helps me fight against that dastardly YouTube algorithmic demon, and by extension helps support the channel. You can also help support the channel by going to Element Games, badoosh, using my affiliate link. But with all of that out of the way, let's get on with the show.
And now for something completely different.
And we're back. Let's talk about the list. And oh man, this list it's some sauce, right? So the list, it is 985 points. We have a Heart Eater, a True Blood, Ephelim the Unknowable, the First Fang, Spawnmaw, Apatrax the Stairfish, and either 3 Planesrunners or 2 Planesrunners and a Kindlefinger. I personally preferred to run the Kindlefinger for an extra Pandemonium play, but 3 Planesrunners is more durable, so if you want to run that, you can run that instead. They are all the same price. You have 15 points left over, and for me, I really like putting either +1 move on that True Blood or +1 strength on Ephelim's range attack, and both work really, really well. I've settled for now on the strength on Ephelim because it gives this list that is fairly low on damage a more reliable way to deal damage. If the matchup means that strength 5 does nothing on most targets, bam, True Blood gets that strength, right? You flex that where needed. And that's the list. And the list is, it's a fun list. This is a toolbox of things. We have a perfect net, we have 4 teleports, we have 2 pulls, we have durability unlock, we've got 3 range profiles, we've got range 2 stuff, we've got some pretty decent damage with Ephelim, the True Blood, the First Fang, Spawnmaw, Heart Eater. Nothing's massively threatening in terms of raw damage output, so it's not really there to brawl with really killy warbands, but it never has to, because the list is fundamentally control. You pull things out of positions, you net things you don't want to fight, you teleport around and overwhelm the opponent with your weird movement bubbles. And of course, you have your Ephelim to pip damage, you've got a Spawnmaw to do some damage, you've got Apatrax to do some really weird damage sometimes. And you've got all your Untamed Beast Planerunners to run around and do objective stuff. The list really feels right on paper as a solid control list. I mean, you're rocking a 9-man warband and you have all of this utility built into the warband now. It feels really good. You can take some casualties, it doesn't really matter. You're outnumbering mid-ranged and elite warbands by maybe even 3 whole models, and when you have so much control on your turn, you can do all kinds of stuff with that model advantage, right? And because you're so mobile and awkward to move around, then the warband just, it sings at picking off people's chaff and then just exacerbating that model advantage in a way that's really hard to deal with. And I had 2 games this week running it, and both were really solid. So starting with the game I had yesterday, this was against Cruel Boys, and the list was interesting. It was a 9-man list, with the highlights of the list being a Grak the Hook, Herc the Howler, a Bolt Boy Boss, and Mollog, and then just filled with chaff to bring them up to 9-man. So this was a fairly killy list. Herc the Howler, Grak the Hook, pretty high damage. Bolt Boy Boss, pretty got good range threat projection, right? Mollog, you don't brawl with Mollog. That guy kills you, right? That guy's a 3, 6, 5'10" when blessed. Guy's insane, right? And I couldn't really fight his big killy stuff on even footing, and it was a objective game. It was Lightning Raid in the Ferocious Gnarlwood 2-pack, and the game went really, really well. My opponent was fantastic, wonderful bloke, but the game was quite dominant, partially down to dice. You know, dice do come into play, and partially because this list is really hard to deal with. And looking at his list, looking at his turn 1 deployments, he had Mollog right in the center of the board for his deployment, and there's like 5 objectives. Mollog really wants to get in the middle in Lightning Raid because then he's next to 2 other objectives. He has a massive range of influence that he can just go in and start smashing things. And if Mollog's there, he just has so much ways to just control that space. Because he has 35 wounds and toughness 5, the guy is kind of insane, and he can throw down a spite shroom, so you get less attacks into him on a massive bubble, and then he's just really hard to deal with, right? Mollog is an absolute beast on the battlefield as he's just a tanky brawler. One of the best around for his points now because he got a pretty hefty points decrease in the FAQ recently. And he really was one of 2 massive threats to my list. The other one being the Bolt Boy Boss, a 15-inch range 6-shot crossbow when stationary with half those shots critting on a 4+ on a double is terrifying when you have wound 8 chaff, wound 10 chaff, wound 6 chaff, right? Your chaff get chunked, your 15 wound first fangs get chunked. Eflin might just die, right? The Bolt Boy Boss is a massive threat in this matchup, as is Mollog. So when I saw Mollog though, set up in the center and the Bolt Boy Boss set up in one of the far corners on turn 1, I saw an opportunity to be a little bit tricky here. And knowing that Mollog was going to go into the center based on just experience, early on, I decided to move my True Blood onto the center as well to contest that middle objective near the end of the turn so he couldn't really take it off us. But placed in such a way that Mollog could actually go towards the True Blood and pull him close to the edge of the objective. Because the plan here was to basically take a smack from Mollog, and on average the True Blood doesn't die. So we're really playing the odds here, right? Relying on the dice just to behave, right? Not like roll badly and not roll amazingly, just kind of roll average and I'll be fine. And then from there, all the tricks come into play on turn 2. And this is basically what happened with Mollog over the course of 2 or 3 turns. Turn 1, I moved up, he moved up. Turn 2, he moved in and attacked. And that's when the trap was sprung, because he was so close to the edge and I had positioned Apatrax to Starefish in such a way that I pulled him off the objective on turn 2, so he didn't score the objective, he didn't kill the True Blood. Then turn 3 starts, and the True Blood lands the net, it doesn't fail. Mollog is not an objective, he's achieving nothing, and he is now netted, and you better believe on turn 4, I netted him again. And Mollog did nothing all game. Now, Mollog is like, what, 320 points blessed? That's like a third of a whole warband on one model, and he achieved nothing. And that is such a massive swing in this game, because now the middle is held by a True Blood, and Mollog is just standing there really angry, not able to impact the game at all for the rest of the game. And that was just like one part of the wombo combo. The second part was on the far right with the Bolt Boy Boss. How did I deal with this Bolt Boy Boss? Speed. The Bolt Boy Boss has a 6-inch minimum range. So if you stand in that 6 inches, he can't do anything. WARCRY boards are also like 24-ish inches, I think, or 20 inches in the short edge, right? The short edge of the board is about 24 inches. If memory serves. That's a little bit too far away for the Bolt Boy Boss to really reach out and hit anything of value or use without actually moving first, which means he can't aim shot on turn 1. So I positioned my chaff and my guys just to move up onto the objectives that they had to hold just out of range. So he had to move up. It was very unlikely he would kill my chaff because you have to crit twice on his 3 dice. Fairly unlikely. Again, relying on these like average dice, right? He'll hit maybe twice, maybe get a crit, like 5 damage is what we're expecting on the worst end of not being dead. I believe he hit us for like no damage, they just completely whiffed the roll, so that's kind of good for me. And the Bolt Boy Boss was done turn 1. Turn 2, my reinforcements came on, and they just sprinted up the board. The Heart Eater, just sprinted up the board, got within that 6 inches. He now can't get shot at. All he has protecting him is grots. He had like a shank and I want to say a stab grot maybe. And those things don't play well into a Heart Eater. He mulches these things like nothing. And yeah, the Heart Eater was totally fine. I engaged just to be safe as well. So the big threats that this Bolt Boy Boss could really engage with were now completely impossible to deal with. And the Heart Eater was there to just beat him to death over the course of the turn. In the end, the Heart Eater didn't actually kill the Bolt Boy Boss, but he did like drop him to near death, killed the chaff guy, and basically kept this Bolt Boy Boss moving and not shooting. And this meant the Bolt Boy Boss didn't really achieve all that much in the grand scheme, and that's pretty good. And that basically secured that right flank. On the left flank, right, I'm splitting this game into 3 separate parts. On the left flank, I had Ephelim and Spawnmore and some chaff, and Abtrax was kind of there as well. And he had coming in on his turn 2, he had like a Grak the Hook, he had a Herc the Howler, he had a Gut Ripper, he had 2 chaff from turn 1 running to engage this left side. So he had 5 models dedicated to the left side over 2 turns, and I had an Ephelim and a Spawnmore. Now, you might think in that scenario that Ephelim and Spawnmore wouldn't be able to hold back such a tide and hold those objectives. And you would be very wrong with that. So with Ephelim and Spawnmore, they never really have to move after like turn 1. They just teleport around and use sudden warp portal. I'll put it on screen now so you can actually read it, but douche. They use sudden warp portal between them to just get around where they need to be and just unleash all kinds of just death and destruction. This happened on turn 1, right? Ephelim got onto a high point vantage point, blew up a chaff and a half, so one grot died and another grot was mortally wounded. His reinforcements came on. The chaff that was mortally wounded got ate by a Spawnmore who just teleported in front of his face and ate him. Grak the Hook got 1 shot thanks to his 2 crits and 2 hits. A pretty good roll, but Grak got deleted by Ephelim as well. That's just happens sometimes. And at that point, he lost 3 of his 5 guys in 2 turns. And now it's 2v2. Ephelim is completely unharmed. Spawnmore is unharmed. And they are so slippery and so mobile, there's nothing the remaining guys can actually do, because wherever they go, Ephelim and Spawnmore will just go elsewhere and stay out of their range and pepper them with shots and just be a pain in the balls. And that's all Ephelim really needs to do in this list. Ephelim is just a powerful range threat. Spawnmore is a kind of average mid-range guy. He's not all that great without like his triple going off. But these two together with like an Apatrax there as well for a bit of support really does just do the work you need it to do. It's nimble, it's fast. And where Ephelim really shines isn't in the stats. It's not even in the abilities power necessarily. It's in the overwhelming nature of having to factor in all of the things you can do with that teleport. The more doubles you have, the more teleports you can throw out, the more mind games you can play without even saying a word. Like, I know what I want to do on my turn. I have this planned out before the turn starts. We're good to go. I know what I want to do. But when you actually break it down from someone playing into FLM, right? It's much harder to actually factor in all the things I could do without me just telling what I'm going to do beforehand, right? Because of the uniqueness of FLM's teleport, of their control, of their mobility, you have to just either wing it, be afraid and have analysis paralysis, or just rush in and hope you can kill them before anything bad happens. And it's hard to wrap your head around because at any point, the models on the board that you see could be somewhere else, and then somewhere else again, and then somewhere else again, constantly reacting to you and getting into places you don't want them to be. And there's not much you can do about that if you don't have something strong enough to kill these models and get to them effectively. And Kruleboyz don't have that outside of their threat projection from, say, a Bolt Boy boss, from, say, if you're going a bit crazy, like the big Gnash Tooth thing, right? The massive cavalry leader. He could pull it off. He's fast enough to catch them, right? But this really led to a game of 3 parts where there was a trap in the middle, and that was sprung and Monologue was taken care of via control. There was the Bolt Boy boss, the next biggest issue. How did I deal with that? I rushed in and then he was neutered for basically the whole game. The right-hand side, it was getting a bit lucky with dice and killing off Grak early, but even with Grak being alive, the mobility and tricky nature of FLM's spawn mode Apatrax Kindlefinger makes it difficult for even killy things like a Grak to really get their hands on them. And eventually he would just be picked down. He's only toughness 3, 15 wounds, right? He's reliably getting chunked down by Spawnmaw and by FLM. So what are you going to do there, right? There's not much. And the overwhelming nature of FLM plus all this control stuff and all this mobility from the Movement 5 Chaff, the Movement 5 Heart Eater, right? It felt great to play, especially into a single Titan list. Because once Monologue, your biggest like melee threat is dealt with, their Titan is dealt with, you're free then just to kind of do what you want, and there's not much they can do. And if they've got multiple Titans, it becomes harder to deal with, but multiple Titans means less models in their warband, which means I have activation advantage, which lets me dance around more effectively. So even that's sort of like a double-edged sword. Multiple Titans or Titans and Dragons means it's harder to net them all and control them all, but it means they've just got less stuff on the board, so I can bait them easier, I can get behind them and deal with that chaff, and do other things. And this game against Kruleboyz was a pretty darn good example of this list just working perfectly against a standard list, right? Really, really fun. And my first game, so that was my second game of the week. I'm working backwards. So my first game of the week was also against Kruleboyz. It was against a Headracker Kruleboyz list with basically a bunch of guys who got a bunch of attacks off. Plus, of course, your Bolt Boy boss, who is your standard go-to for leaders in Kruleboyz. So he had a killer boss with flail, he had a tooth dagger, he had what's he called again? The laddie who can stab people a lot and they bleed to death, right? That guy. A bunch of guys with really high attack values, and then Headracker, who increases all their crit by 3. So these guys are kind of insane for just doing massive burst damage. Of course, that crit damage also works on aimed shot for that Bolt Boy boss. So his crits aren't 4 damage, they're 7 damage, critting on a 4+, not a 6+. There's some spice. This is really spicy for the burst. And my opponent, Grotch, is a fantastic opponent. He's actually played FLM a lot. And this is my first game with FLM in quite some time. So he helped me walk me through some of the things that had escaped my memory from just lack of playing FLM. I used to play FLM a lot with Cypher Lords back in the day. So he helped walk me through that first turn. But after that, it really came together nicely. Again, FLM is so reliable at getting 2 shots off. You might think, man, that's only a 7-inch range. How are you getting those 2 shots off every single turn? You teleport. You never have to move with FLM. You just teleport somewhere, then blow something up, and then if you need to, teleport again with another guy to swap with FLM like a spawn more, then eat the guy who dares come to try and kill FLM, right? So there's lots of like weird little plays. And how this game really ended up being was that it was fairly close, But some key mistakes by my opponent really helped secure the game, and I won by a very small margin. But it really helped that there was a lot of focus on the FLM stuff. Like with the first game I was talking about, people tend to tunnel vision on FLM because he's such a weird piece and he does so much stuff. He's the guy you pump your dice into, and you want to stop him having free reign, or her, if it's a she, her having free reign over the battlefield. And this tends to lead to a kind of tunnel vision, and people tend to then forget about other parts of your list. And this happened several times with Plains Runners. Again, we played Lightning Raid, so we played it twice this week, and Lightning Raid is a very brutal objective game where your turn 2 deployments really have to put in their cardio to really impact the game. So his main killy thing was his killer boss, and that guy had to run the whole length of the board just to get into any kind of combat, and then in the end didn't. He never actually got to swing his mace, if I recall correctly. So that was kind of unfortunate. But things like Plains Runners, things like that Hearty being movement 5, people don't expect these things to move that quickly. So they're planning their turns and they're focused on what FLM can do and all this weird FLM stuff. And then out of nowhere, a Plains Runner runs further than you expect and then takes an objective you thought was completely safe. And this happened 2 or possibly 3 times this game, where Plains Runners or the Heart Eater moved further and did things and caught my opponent off guard, because a lot of this focus was on FLM and killing off Spawnmo and killing off Kindlefinger and all that good stuff. And ultimately it just ended up being that the chaff were the guys who were doing all the work. They were taking the objectives, they were doing all this like sneaky stuff. The first Fang lobbing the harpoon out, the Trueblood throwing his net to stop like Tooth Dagger getting into combat to start his crit engine, right? So there was a lot of like little things that went on that really helped the list shine in this matchup, especially when he had such a powerful burst potential on so many models in this list. There's not much else to say other than this list just felt really, really good. It felt nice on the battlefield. It did its job. It was super controlly, having a perfect net, having the teleports, having the pulls, having the fast chaff, having the durable too, right? You have that brute resilience to reduce the damage you take in. You have the resurrections on FLM, so if Spawnmo, Abatrax, Kindlefinger die, you can bring them back. It has a deceptive amount of durability for a warband that is mostly toughness 3 and caps out at 20 wounds. It's got a surprising amount of damage despite having nothing with a massively impressive damage profile individually. It has the control aspects to deal with things you can't kill, and it felt good. It feels really good to play. But what would I change? If I was to change this list in any way, I think I would keep Kindlefinger. I don't think I would take a third Plains round. That Kindlefinger not only gives me a bit extra range, right? A 5-1-1-1 profile is not great, but it is a bit of chip at 6 inches. If you're stationary, which is fairly common, that's 10 shots, right? You're looking at like maybe 3-4 damage, 4 being the upper end of the average there. And that's not too bad for 55 points. And having an extra teleport target, a teleport source, a teleport initiator is really nice. Surprisingly, despite singing the praises of the first Fang for literal weeks now, the first Fang might be a little bit redundant in this list. And that's upsetting to say. For 130 points, I found that I wasn't actually using his pull because I had other things to do. I had a different pull with Apotrax. So he is a nice backup puller. He is good at range. He is good in melee. He's fairly durable. He's not too expensive. He's a solid profile. But I could save points. I could drop the first Fang to a prey taker with like +4 wounds. Have someone that's better in melee. Have someone who's almost as durable. Is 15 points cheaper. And then that allows me to bless the Trueblood with +1 move and bless FLM with +1 strength. And of course, still bless the Prey Taker with +4 wounds, and the warband remains at 9. And that might be better than packing that first fang. I could also drop the first fang and take a beast speaker. And you may go, why? Why would you take a beast speaker? There's no beasts in that list. There's actually a fair few. Spawnmore, Apotrax, and Kindlefinger are all beasts, which means the beast speaker can whip all these things to attack again, which is somewhat important on something like Spawnmore. But there's also surprising amounts of like play in whipping Kindlefinger to shoot more often. For the meme whip to get Kindlefinger going again. There's a lot of like weird little plays there with that beast speaker. But I think both of those are potentials. If I wanted to go really heavy into chaff, there's the play that you drop the first fang for 2 planes runners. You could drop the first fang for a flame spooler and get a much worse range profile, a much worse defensive and melee profile thing, but gaining another source of teleport that has the ability to actually pick things up. Because of all these beasts, they can't carry treasures. The flame spooler is the only thing that isn't Ephelim that can actually carry treasure, giving you a treasure carrier as well. At that point, though, I am concerned the list is then too heavy. It's too heavy into Ephelim's Pandemonium, and that's not really what I want to do. I want this list to still have really strong ties to Untamed Beasts, and currently I think the balance is there. You have the raw damage output of the Untamed Beasts, and you have the chaff to do your objective stuff. That's a key element to this list working, is that 4-man current block of Untamed Beasts. It wouldn't work without it. And then you have your control aspects tacked on, and then you're good to go. So I don't think taking Flame Spooler is good for that balance. I think it becomes just then you just take all of Ephelim's Pandemonium and the True Blood, and then you're just taking Untamed Beasts as like a vestigial thing. And that's not what I want to do here. But that's the list. That's the road to gold so far. It was 2 very successful games running this list, and it felt good. And importantly as well, it felt fun. I had loads of fun playing this list. It wasn't just playing a generic chaos list. It was playing something that had loads of avenues to victory, loads of trick potential. Like, just to put into perspective here, right? What does this list actually have in it? It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 doubles, 3 triples, and 5 quads, and 3 reactions. Like, the amount of things you can do in a single turn with that many abilities is kind of wild, and it's fun to juggle all that. It's fun to juggle a warband this size with all these varied profiles and ways of playing. That isn't just running your generic competitive list of I'm going to take some Unga Bunga stuff and then take my Bunga to your Unga, right? And that's fun to play. I play Unga Bunga all the time. It is a fun way to play, but this is really refreshing. It feels like a refined version of my initial idea to run Gnarl Spirit Pack. It's not exactly thematic, but I will still argue having 3 beasts in an Untamed Beast list is by default very thematic, and argue with me in the comments if you disagree. That's the end of Road to Gold. Another little ramble, an off-the-cuff ramble off the top of the old dome. It's been a lot of fun. I love doing Road to Gold. I love just going through my thought processes and how it's having a natter, right? People respond in the comments, and it's always fun. If you have other list ideas, refinements I've missed, or just whole lists you would like me to check out, drop them in the comments down below. I'll give them a look. I might even take them. We will see. But until the next ramble, lads, ladies, and everybody in between and beyond, ta-ra.
Groovy.
Hey all, and welcome to the post-toast credits. A massive shout out to my algorithmic demon slayers, Andy Morris, blah blah blah, the Head Knight of Paint, Heinz D, Long Run Hobbies, Lord Phylax, Maps, Sable Saber, Steph, Steve Bean, the Houston Toad, Tough Tootin' Baby, and Velas. A huge thank you for supporting the channel, and I will catch you all next time. Ta-ra!